Anniversaries used to mean something to me. Not just a yearly nod at vows we made in front of friends and God, but a checkpoint, one of those rare moments where you could pause and think we made it this far. And on that particular Thursday night in May, I believed we had. 15 years. We had made it through job layoffs, family illnesses, a miscarriage, and rebuilding a business after a fire. So I told myself this one would be different. Special, even. I closed the cafe early. Gave my staff the night off, told them I'd handle everything. I moved one of the bistro tables out onto the sand not far from where I'd first kissed Haley all those years ago. The evening breeze was just cool enough to make the candles flicker and the last streaks of sun dipped below the water as if nature itself wanted to be part of this memory. Her favorite wine, Sancerre, chilled perfectly. Calla lilies in a simple vase. A handwritten note tucked beside her plate. I hadn't written her a note in years. She was late. 10 minutes turned into 20, then 45. I refreshed her wine twice. Told myself traffic on the PCH could be brutal. Maybe she stopped to change. Maybe she forgot her phone. At 53 minutes past the reservation time, I saw her. And I saw him. The man beside her wasn't from Malibu. You can always tell. He wore a charcoal blazer, not a wrinkle in sight, and polished shoes that hadn't touched a grain of sand. He walked with that quiet entitlement, the kind of man who'd never sweat through a double shift or wash dishes to keep the lights on. His hand rested on the small of her back with a familiarity that made my stomach twist. Haley smiled when she saw me. Not the smile she used to have when I'd come home early or surprised her with her favorite coffee. This one was strained. Like she was performing. "Nick," she said brightly, too brightly. "This is Jason. I ran into him just up the road and crazy, right? He's in town for a few days. Thought it'd be nice to catch up." I nodded once. Said nothing. My throat felt dry like I'd swallowed sand. My eyes didn't leave hers, though. I watched the micro-expressions flicker across her face. Surprise. Apprehension. A dash of guilt. And something else, defiance. I didn't speak to Jason. Didn't shake his hand. I just stepped forward, took my seat, then pulled the napkin from my lap and slowly folded it back onto the table. The sound of the waves filled the silence. Then I reached for my left hand. My ring hadn't left that finger since the day we got married on that same beach. It had a little nick in it from when I fell while helping her father move a couch. Haley had laughed so hard that day she cried. I slid the ring off and let it drop into her wine glass. It landed with a quiet clink, the kind of sound that slices the air sharper than a shout ever could. She gasped softly. Jason shifted, unsure if he should speak. I didn't wait. I stood up, buttoned the top of my linen shirt and walked away without looking back. Not at her. Not at him. Not at the table where 15 years of memories sat slowly dissolving in candlelight. By the time I reached the edge of the surf, my legs felt numb. I stood barefoot in the cold water, letting it rush over my feet like it could wash away the image of them walking in together. My chest was tight, too tight to cry, too hollow to scream. I just stood there, staring out at the dark horizon. An hour passed. The tide crept in. From where I stood, I could just make out the glow of the cafe's lights. A server told me later that Jason stayed. Ordered steak. She didn't eat. Just sat there, staring at the wine glass. At the ring inside it. I wonder what she was thinking. Was she shocked that I didn't make a scene? That I didn't interrogate or accuse or demand answers in front of a stranger? Or did she expect it? After all, the man she married had always been the calm one. The lifeguard turned cafe owner who fixed things quietly. The guy who gave the benefit of the doubt until there was no doubt left. But I wasn't that man anymore. I drove home in silence that night. Didn't play music. Didn't call anyone. I parked in the driveway and sat in the truck until the dome light clicked off. Then I went inside, poured myself a glass of bourbon, Haley's favorite, ironically, and sat on the back porch with the dog curled up beside me. I watched the stars come out. She didn't come home that night. She texted once. "Nick, I didn't expect tonight to go like this. Can we talk?" I didn't reply. What was there to say? I left the message unread, turned off my phone, and for the first time in years I locked the bedroom door behind me. The next morning I woke up to silence. No smell of Haley's perfume drifting through the hallway. No clatter of her makeup brushes. No hum of her espresso machine sputtering to life. Just stillness and the soft, rhythmic thump of our golden retriever, Gus, wagging his tail as he sat by my side of the bed. He didn't even look toward her empty spot. Maybe he already knew. I made coffee. Black. I stood by the kitchen window, staring out at the ocean, and for the first time in a long time I started retracing every thread I'd chosen not to pull. Every red flag I'd quietly folded into a drawer and locked shut. It's strange how fast the mind works once the dam breaks. The hotel receipts. They started showing up in our shared email a few months ago, innocuous at first. Conference centers. Parking validation. Haley said she was traveling for work, seminars, continuing education, networking mixers. She's a clinical psychologist, the kind who gives talks about childhood resilience and keeps lavender oil in her office. It wasn't odd for her to be gone a night or two. Until it was. One time she'd said she was visiting her sister in San Diego. I brought Gus in for a grooming appointment that day and the receptionist mentioned they'd seen Haley in town at a new wine bar. Alone. She said it casually. I brushed it off. Then there were the cosmetics. High-end stuff, brands I'd never heard of, packaged in matte black boxes with French names. She kept them in her car trunk. I found them when I helped her carry groceries in one day. She said they were gifts from a client. I didn't ask more. But the passwords, that was when I started to feel the foundation shift. One night, about 2 months ago, she left her phone in the bathroom. It lit up with a notification while I was brushing my teeth. I glanced at it reflexively. The name was Jason. I remembered it because it was followed by a winking emoji. When she returned and saw me holding her phone, her whole body stiffened. She yanked it from my hand and said she needed to update security settings for her patient confidentiality. By the next day, all our shared logins were changed. Her laptop required facial recognition. Even her iPad asked for a passcode I didn't know. I tried to talk to her. Once. Asked if everything was okay. She snapped. Said I was suffocating her. That she needed space. That I was turning into a suspicious husband and she didn't want to live like that. I apologized. Of course I did. I used to believe that people didn't just fall out of love. That something catastrophic had to happen. A betrayal. A death. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes love dies slowly, like a tide going out inch by inch until you're standing on dry sand wondering when the water left. Even Gus had noticed. Haley used to take him on her morning jogs, dress him in little bandanas for the holidays. Now he followed me everywhere. He slept on my side of the bed, nose pressed against the wall, ears twitching at every creak in the hallway like he was waiting for something that would never come. I took him for a walk that morning down the shoreline behind the cafe. Locals waved as we passed, but my mind was elsewhere. I remembered a night last winter. Haley had come home late, said her car broke down near Camarillo. I offered to pick her up. She insisted she'd already called a tow truck. Said she didn't want me to drive out. I didn't question it. But now I wondered, where was she really? That night, I couldn't sleep. I poured a second glass of bourbon and sat on the couch, the dog snoring gently at my feet. The TV was on, muted. I stared at our wedding photo on the mantel, Haley in her lace gown, sun in her hair, and me in a sand-covered tux, smiling like a man who thought he'd won the lottery. I picked up the tablet we kept in the living room, mostly for reading recipes or watching cooking videos. Something nudged at me. I opened the browser, logged into our shared iCloud account. I hadn't checked it in years. It still remembered the old credentials. It loaded slowly. Then I saw it. Her location history. Palm Springs. 4 days ago. Pinned to a private villa just outside the city. That was the weekend she'd said she was speaking at a psychology symposium in Monterey. I zoomed in. It wasn't a hotel or a conference center. It was a private rental. A villa with a pool. A sick, cold feeling started in my chest. I clicked on her photo backup. Most were selfies, sh*ts of her lunch, notes from her office. But tucked between pictures of travel brochures and her dog-eared therapy books were Candid's sandy feet next to a wine glass, 2 pairs of shoes by a bed, and a reflection in a sliding glass door. A man's silhouette. Tall. In a blazer. Jason. I recognized the watch on his wrist. He wore it at our anniversary dinner. The next morning, I packed an overnight bag, told my assistant I was taking a short trip to meet a supplier. I drove east, past the wind farms and Joshua trees. My hands stayed tight on the wheel the entire drive. When I arrived at the address, I didn't knock. Her car was parked out front. I pulled around back, stopped just far enough away to stay out of view. I crept up near the privacy fence and looked through the edge of a sun-warped panel. There they were. She was laughing, feeding him from her fork. Her legs curled under her like she was at home. His hand rested on her thigh, fingers trailing lazy circles as they watched a movie on the patio TV. I didn't breathe. Didn't cry. Didn't break. I pulled out my phone. Took a photo. Zoomed in until their faces were unmistakable. Then I drove back to a gas station off the interstate, printed the image at a kiosk, and slid it into an envelope. I wrote only 4 words on the back. Still think I don't know? I mailed it to her work. No return address. She never replied. After I sent the photo, something inside me clicked. Not in a dramatic, movie-style way, no epiphany or screaming into the void. It was quiet. Cold. Like a switch had been flipped. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to confront her with trembling hands and watery eyes asking her why. I had already seen the why with my own eyes. Now I needed the how. I needed to know exactly how deep this went, how far I'd been dragged into a lie. Haley came home 2 days later. Said nothing about the envelope. Nothing about the trip. Nothing about why she hadn't returned my texts since I told her we needed to talk. She walked in like nothing had happened. Kicked off her heels, hummed as she poured a glass of water. I watched her from across the kitchen. It was like looking at a stranger wearing my wife's face. Long day? She asked, like it was any other Tuesday. Yeah, I said. Busy week ahead. She nodded. No eye contact. No acknowledgement. Just glossed over civility. It would have been easier if she yelled or sobbed or even offered a poorly crafted excuse. Instead, she acted like she'd rehearsed this version of reality where we still shared a life, where the villa in Palm Springs never existed and I hadn't slipped a picture of her infidelity into a manila envelope and mailed it to her office. That night, she slept soundly, curled toward the wall. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan and counting the slow, steady rotations. The next morning, she left early for work. Claimed she had a patient breakfast consultation. I waited until her taillights disappeared down the street before I opened the closet. Her briefcase was still there. I know how that sounds, like I was stooping, snooping, trying to catch her in the act. But there was no honor left to preserve. Whatever sacred line existed between husband and wife had already been obliterated the night she fed another man from her fork. I wasn't searching for ammunition. I was searching for understanding. Inside the briefcase, I found a stack of appointment reminders, a few notebooks, and a flash drive in a side pouch. I tucked it in my pocket and closed everything back the way it was. Later that day, I drove to the cafe and slipped into my office before opening the drive. Most of the files were client notes, coded, anonymized. But buried in a folder labeled Referrals was a subfolder called Jason. Inside were PDFs, scanned invoices, and an signed contract for something called Crawford Consulting. There were emails too. Forwarded messages that talked about partnership opportunities, one even mentioning a silent investor. My stomach dropped when I saw the cafe's name in one of them. I clicked through the attachments until I found a document that froze me in my seat, a loan application. It had my name on it. The cafe's name. The amount was staggering 6 figures. The signature on the bottom was mine. Except I hadn't signed it. I knew the notary listed at the bottom. She used to come into the cafe for muffins. I remembered because she always asked for oat milk. Her name was Jenna Lawson. I Googled her that night. Turns out Jenna had a disciplinary record. Something about falsified identity verification on housing loans. Her name was mentioned in a civil suit tied to Jason Crawford, yes, the same Jason. It wasn't just an affair. It was a con. Haley hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. She'd forged my signature, used me as a pawn in a fraud scheme I didn't even know I was part of. And I still hadn't confronted her. Because I wasn't ready for fireworks. I wanted justice. The next morning, I texted an old friend, Darren. We'd served together back in the Coast Guard. After I left, he stayed in federal service and eventually started his own PI firm. We hadn't spoken in years, but when I explained the situation, he didn't hesitate. Meet me at the Marina Grill, noon tomorrow, he said. We sat in a booth facing the water. I brought the flash drive, the printed loan documents, and a copy of the photo from the villa. This guy's name is Jason Crawford, I told Darren. He's not just some guy my wife's seeing. He's part of something bigger. Darren leaned back and scanned the documents with the kind of focus only military guys could maintain for hours. He's on a watch list, he said after a few minutes. A what? Department of Housing and Urban Development. He's been linked to multiple fraudulent real estate investments in California and Arizona. This notary, Jenna Lawson, she was indicted 3 years ago but cut a plea deal. She testified that she'd been working under pressure from an unnamed male associate. Let me guess, I said. He nodded. Jason. Darren agreed to dig deeper. Said he'd need a few days, but he'd get back to me. In the meantime, I kept up the charade. I went home. Cooked dinner. Listened to Haley talk about work like she wasn't carving pieces out of my life one by one. Then one evening, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed. I recognized the notification app, one of those encrypted messaging platforms. The preview read, "Final draft of the transfer is in motion. We'll be rich?" I took a screenshot *T, emailed it to myself. Then I deleted the message preview from the home screen. The transfer? I pulled up the cafe's business bank account. My stomach twisted when I saw a pending request, an account change form marked ownership restructuring, scheduled for review that Friday. If approved, it would reassign the cafe's primary ownership to a limited liability entity registered to an anonymous Nevada address. I printed everything, put it in a folder labeled taxes, left it on my nightstand. Haley never touched it. 3 days later, Darren called. Got something, he said. You're not going to like it. He emailed me a dossier. Inside were property records, business licenses, tax filings. Jason Crawford had a pattern. He'd get romantically involved with women who had access to physical businesses, cafes, salons, yoga studios. Within months, he'd either assume legal control or drive the business into bankruptcy and flip the assets. He was never listed on any of the deals directly, but he always benefited. And now he was doing it again. With Haley. With my cafe. I sat in my office and stared at the documents until the sun went down. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I prayed. Not for her. Not for me. But for clarity. Because this wasn't just betrayal. This was war. There's a specific kind of anger that doesn't look like shouting. It doesn't break things. It doesn't pace the room or slam doors. It sits still. Quiet. Focused. It's the kind of anger that sharpens into resolve like a blade being honed edge by edge. That's where I was. I couldn't unsee what I had uncovered. I had the loan documents, the fake signature, the emails, the property trail linking Jason Crawford to a string of collapsed small businesses, and the notary, Jenna, who'd already been caught once but clearly hadn't retired from her old tricks. The next move needed to be precise. I wasn't interested in confrontation anymore. I wanted exposure. I wanted consequence. I started by building a file. A digital war chest. I organized everything, every receipt Haley had left behind, every GPS ping from her phone, **TS of texts, bank statements showing money leaving our joint account and landing in shell companies registered in Jason's name. I even included the grainy villa photo, timestamped with a geolocation tag. It was meticulous. Ironclad. And then I added something else. An audio file. It came from a voice memo app Haley had left open on her old iPad. She used to record notes for her sessions, transcriptions for papers she was working on. This one I hadn't meant to find. It was a conversation between her and Jason. I sat frozen as their voices played. He won't notice, Jason was saying. He's too loyal. You could swap the deed out with a receipt for surf wax and he'd just nod and say thank you. Haley laughed, my wife. She laughed. I'm not trying to hurt him, she said. I want a future that isn't tied to a beach cafe forever. Is that so wrong? No, Jason replied smoothly. You deserve more. That's what we're building here. Building. They were planning a future on the back of my name, my work, my trust. The next day, I contacted Darren and asked for a referral to a federal contact. He sent me to a woman named Lila Harrington, an investigator tied to the Department of Justice's white-collar crime division. Darren called ahead, told her I was coming. I drove to downtown LA and met her in a quiet office tucked into a building that didn't have a sign. It was all very hush-hush, gray walls, polite nods, secure elevators. Lila didn't look surprised when I laid out the file. She'd seen Jason's name before. He's slippery, she said, flipping through the documents. No direct ties to anything, just enough distance to keep his hands clean. But this. She tapped the audio transcript. This could be the missing piece. She asked if I'd be willing to assist in building a larger case. I agreed on the spot. She said they'd need a little time. But in the meantime, she recommended not alerting Haley or Jason to what I knew. Let them feel safe, she said. That's when they make mistakes. So I played my role. For 2 more weeks, I acted like the same husband she thought she'd outmaneuvered. I smiled. Cooked. I even agreed to host a family dinner she'd been putting off for months. She took the bait. Maybe we're turning a corner, she said one night, curling into me like we were still us. I didn't say anything, just held her while she drifted off. Unaware I was counting the days until it all came crashing down. When the dinner finally arrived, I prepped everything myself. Set the table with linen napkins and handmade place cards. Haley's parents came, her brother and his wife, their 2 kids. The whole tableau looked picture perfect. Warm lighting, laughter, wine flowing freely. I waited until dessert. Homemade peach cobbler. Then I stood up. There's something I want to share, I said. Haley looked at me, puzzled. Her brother made a joke about a slideshow from our trip to Napa. I smiled. I connected my laptop to the TV and opened a folder titled Anniversary Project. The first slide was a photo of our wedding. The second was of the villa. The third, Jason and Haley, mid-embrace. The room went dead silent. "Nick," Haley said, her voice brittle. "What are you doing?" "I think they should know," I said calmly. "What you've been up to." More images. Bank records. The forged loan application. A waveform representing the audio file began to play. Jason's voice filled the room. "Swap the deed." Haley's parents looked like they'd been hit by a freight train. Her brother stood up, jaw clenched. One of the kids started to cry. Then the doorbell rang. 2 federal agents entered. Badges out. "Haley Montgomery?" one of them asked. She stood up. "What is this?" "You're under investigation for financial fraud, identity forgery, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud." "No, no," she said, backing up. The agents remained calm. "You can come with us quietly or we can escalate." She looked at me, eyes wild. "Nick, please, don't do this." "I'm not," I said flatly. "You did this." She didn't resist. Just walked out, her hands shaking, cuffed at the wrists. Her mother sobbed into a napkin. Her father stared at the floor. No one moved. After they left, I turned off the TV. Cleared the plates. Nobody touched dessert. Later that night, I got a call from Lila. "You did good," she said. "We flipped her." "What?" "She's talking. She gave us everything. Jason's next." And just like that, the woman I once thought I'd spend the rest of my life with was helping build a case against the man she'd nearly destroyed me for. The fallout was fast. Jason vanished the next day, abandoned his rental, wiped his socials. Haley was placed under house arrest pending further cooperation. She was allowed one call. She didn't use it on me. I didn't expect her to. Her mother, strangely, reached out. She asked if I needed help at the cafe. Said she couldn't make sense of what her daughter had become, but that she believed in what I was doing. She started showing up 3 mornings a week. At first to clean, then to help run the register. Within a month, she was managing the books. "I'm sorry," she told me one day, eyes red-rimmed but steady. "For everything." "Don't be," I said. "You're the only Montgomery who showed up when it counted." Meanwhile, Darren kept tabs on the case. Jason's name began circulating on federal lists. A warrant was issued. Border alerts were triggered. The whole machine had been set into motion. And me? I went back to work. I served coffee, made smoothies, talked to customers about their dogs and their kids and their latest sunburns. And each night, when I locked the door, I told myself I was one day closer to being free.